realizing you're a neshama who's got a body rather than a body who's just trying to manage all these problems. You know, there's a famous quote that people attribute to Albert Einstein, but I don't think it's really from him. And it goes, you can't fix a problem at the same level of consciousness that created the problem. So most of modern three worlds medicine is trying to fix the problem at the level that created it. It's astonishing how much the Zohar and other texts predicted things we're learning in modern medical science. It's mind-blowing over the years. Like there was a brilliance there in understanding how our breathing and the function of our heart and the fats in our body affect mental illness and amazing things.
Welcome back everyone to the Frum Health Club Podcast. I'm your host, Mendo Krashinsky. Here at the Frum Health Club, we believe that health isn't separate from our Yiddishkeit. It's all part of it. When we strengthen our bodies, we become better able to serve Hashem, our families, and our communities with energy, strength, and clarity. Today, we're very honored to welcome back to the podcast Dr. Andrew David Shiller. Dr. Shiller earned his medical degree at Duke University and completed dual residency training at Harvard Medical School. For over 3 decades, he has blended rigorous medical science with natural and integrative healing, focusing on nutrition, movement, stress reduction, and the deep connection between the body, mind, and soul. He works to uncover the root cause and helps patients truly reclaim their lives. In this conversation, we're discussing the topic of stress and its effects on the body. Dr. Shiller breaks down what stress actually is, how it impacts the nervous system and every organ system, and why chronic stress can quietly drive inflammation, pain, fatigue, and long-term illness. And then we take it deeper into something powerful, the difference between simply managing stress and reconnecting to who we really are, and how that shift can change the way we experience life. This was a fascinating conversation, and I hope you really enjoy it. Dr. Shiller, thank you so much for coming back to the podcast. It was really a pleasure to have you on the first time, and thank you for coming again to the podcast. It's really a pleasure.
My pleasure. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, so today we're going to be discussing a very interesting topic, something that affects, I think, probably everyone in this world, stress. Yeah. It's definitely a big topic, and I'm so excited to hear about it from you.
Great, sure. Yeah, it's a big part of what I've been doing for like 30 years.
Yeah.
It's a big part of our lives.
Yeah, definitely.
Potentially.
We, of course, know that stress is bad. People talk about how bad it is for you, and it makes it seem like there's like something biological happening.
Right.
So why should people care about stress?
Yeah, sure. So like stress can be really bad. Stress is not always really bad. And maybe we'll talk about that at some point about what there's good stress, bad stress. What? I thought stress is bad. But like, yeah, it's when stress is chronic and it's when it's unregulated and it's when it's overriding the person's nervous system that it creates biological effects, because we are one unit, right? Body, emotion, mind, spirit. Integration, Jews, like everything is one.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to be a spiritual or religious Jew to recognize that everything's connected to everything else. And so that sort of simple felt sense experience that people have, that sometimes, when I'm stressed out, my pain is worse, or when I'm stressed out, I get like belly, blah, blah, whatever kind of symptoms, and people come to me like that all the time. But then we've got this really growing big research base that's showing us all of the potential negative effects of stress and the way it affects all of the nervous system, all the organ systems of the body. What are organ systems? Brain, your kidneys, your digestive system, your musculoskeletal system, your immune system. Like every system in the body is in a conversation, in this soup of information where all of the organs are connected to each other, and all of that's modulated by the stress response, which we can talk about in more detail. And so not only do we mapped out these pathways whereby everything's connected, but there's also been research with different models of stress, meaning those stress people, those stress animals, they'll measure the stress and they'll look at outcomes like, wow, people have more likely to get a heart attack, people more likely to have bad outcomes after breast cancer treatment, people with chronic stress more likely to have immune impairment and not be able to fight illnesses or have proper responses to vaccines for those of you who take vaccines these days. But But the point is that it affects all these systems, that people who have an overactive stress or unbalanced stress response are more likely to have chronic abdominal pain or persistent symptoms in the belly, more likely to have various really bad disease processes, and either making the disease worse or making the experience and suffering of the disease worse. And that only doesn't begin to talk about, dealing with stuff like anxiety and depression and just the kind of, there's so much disconnection and frustration and fear permeating world culture right now. And stress is part of it because it changes our biochemistry, it changes our thinking, it changes our emotions, and it changes our perceptions.
So what do you think are some of the most driving factors of stress? Like why are people stressed nowadays?
Sure.
More than ever, it seems like.
You mean, okay, well, let's define what stress is. Can we do that?
Yes, let's do that.
And
definitely.
so there's some slides which will include or not include, whatever you want to do, but the three things that, what is stress? Is it the external thing that's going on in the environment? A bomb went off in my neighborhood, or there was really bad news, or the stock market fell. Is that stress? Then there's perception of wow, this happened and I'm really scared. That's a impersonal, perceptual reaction to it. And then there's the biology of it, because we have a physiology that is stress physiology. And what I would say is that all three of those things are stress. And so it's not just the external stimulus, it's our mental emotional response to the stimulus, and it's our physiological response to our mental emotional response. But then there's also stress that occurs inside our body depending on what's happening in our biology. Our culture blurs the distinction. That was stressful, or I felt so stressed and anxious, or my stomach hurts. These are all expressions of stress. And most of the time we're not separating out and understanding well, what's the external data? What's my interpretation, what's my parshanut, and then what's my physical reaction to it? And they're all part of the picture.
Wow, so interesting. Let's unpack what stress is.
So let's talk about this whole physiologic reaction, right? The world of why a person perceives the world in a certain way or makes meaning out of external events, right? Two people can have the same experience, and for one it's very stressful, the other one gets activated and motivated, and it pushes them towards doing something different or better. We're all different in the way we're wired. But this underlying biology, which is part of how stress or an overactive stress response creates illness, it's worth understanding. And I find that most of my patients, when they start to get it, they're like, oh yeah, this is important. So let's just look at a cool picture, right? This is a schematic of the autonomic nervous system. I didn't make this drawing. This is from, probably Dr. Netter's textbook of anatomy, right? And the point is that here are all the organs in the middle of the body. Here are all the organs in the middle of the body, and there's two nervous systems split here because your autonomic nervous system has these two parts. There's the relaxation response and the stress response. We call that the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. That sympathetic stress response, that's over here on the left, right? And it's got and that's the get up and go. That's the fight, flight, freeze that many people hear about, and that's what we typically think about as a stress response. And the thing to know is that this is neurological at every level of the spinal cord, from your thoracic spine to your lumbar spine. You have nerves coming out that are going to all your organs and saying, stress time, we're going to do things differently. And then your parasympathetic nervous system on the other side, which is recovery and repair. It's rest and digest. And it's got different innervation, but it's nerves. The nerves are coming out of the brainstem. A lot of people have heard of the vagus nerve that comes out of the brainstem and touches all of your organs. That's a parasympathetic relaxation nerve. And then your sacrum, the bottom of your spine, you've got nerve roots that are relaxation nerves. And that's rest and digest. Oh, okay, the stress is over, time to relax, have a hug with the person I love, have a nice meal, play with my kids, get some rest, get some sleep, and that's when our body heals itself. And we have so much information now about how during rest and sleep is a regenerative process. The body heals and regenerates itself. During stress, it's like get up and go, we got to deal with something. The main thrust of this balance is that when I get the signal in my brain that says, I got to run, right? It activates my stress response, my fight, flight, freeze response. It puts more blood to my muscles. It makes my reflexes tighten up. It makes my vision more like acute. It takes my mind, it makes it more like vigilant. So I can run after the tennis ball or run away from the fire or deal with the bad guy who's trying to get in my house.
Yeah.
So it's about biasing our information. What's the main priority right now? And so in the short term, that's not a bad thing. The problem is the chronic thing. And so let's just look at another graphic that shows that, oh wait, no, we got this other thing, because it's not just nerves. A lot of people have heard of cortisol or adrenaline, noradrenaline, and those are stress hormones. And some of them come out of the brain, and then there's also like messengers that come out of the brain that talk to the adrenal glands and make the adrenals generate epinephrine and norepinephrine and cortisol. And those are our stress hormones. We've also got these things that are called peptides, which are like more subtle communication molecules. So like that's why the stress of running away from a fire or a crisis is very different than the stress of playing a really fun game of tennis or dancing at your friend's wedding, because of the other chemistry and neurology that colors that experience. And if you ask me, a big part of it comes down to connection versus disconnection. And that's probably the most Torah understanding of it. It's like, you know, what is galut? What is exile? It's when we're separated from a sense of connection to the source of life.
Wow. Yeah.
And that creates the sense of danger, right? It's stress chemistry, the bad, negative stress chemistry. If it's prolonged, it's the danger signaling. It's the, wow, we got something ugly going on that we have to deal with. If it's short term, we can cope with it. If it goes on for years and years, it starts to have its effect. And so one way I like to show that is like the normal cycle is like this little curve where stress goes up and down and up and down, and you're okay, you know, like day by day. All right, I'm dealing with my life. But then for some people, there's more stress and there's less relaxation, and it gets imbalanced. And their stress response is overactive and over time, and that becomes negative. And like that's dependent on a bunch of different things. There's genetic qualities. Some people are naturally genetically more inclined to have greater spikes of stress hormones and stress neurology, and tend to break those things down less quickly. So they're in a more stressed state. And that has epigenetic factors to it, right? Somebody who for generations has lived in a war zone or has lived in a persecutory situation, the second, third generation is going to have a bias potentially towards more stress activity. It even shows up in our daily habits. The foods we eat and the thoughts we think and where our mindset is at is part of what flips on and flips off genes.
Wow.
With the epigenetic. It's a real thing, and we've measured that. You know, how strong is that physiologic response, which is very dependent on the person, on their conditioning. You know, somebody who was kind of like bitten by a dog when they were 6 years old, and then when they're 25 and they see a dog that barks and like, like you're sitting next to me like, what's wrong? It's just a dog, he wants to lick you. But like, no, that person's experiencing that. And then does it shut off? Does it persist? And how does the person respond to recurrent stimuli? Some people adapt or habituate like, oh, I've been through this, I can deal with it. For some people, they were overwhelmed by it, and it happens again, and they have an even bigger response. So everybody's got a difference in how they respond. And so this is a crucial thing for people to understand, because like two kids could grow up in the same house and go through the same event early in life, or some thing happens, God forbid, and they might have completely different experiences in them. One might be traumatized, and one might be like, oh yeah, that was bad, but like here we are, it's cool, let's live, you know. And it's complex, it's very individual. And so we can't impose our frame on another person and say, oh, it wasn't a big deal, why are you complaining about that? That doesn't help at all. You know. So anyhow. This is a question you wanted to ask me. You said, how does stress make us sick and accelerate aging? And you were also asking about cardiovascular disease. And there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information. And one of the big things is really danger signaling, right? Like we got this whole system in our physiology that's there to say danger, because that's what you know, unbalanced, unhealthy stress is. It's danger signaling. And one of the main ways that's expressed is the immune system. And so I kind of like this graphic, right? We talked about the autonomic nervous system, which is our stress system. It's out of balance when we have an overactive stress response. It's actually pro-inflammatory. So we got this little fire burning there. The immune system is like a fire, so to speak. We use that as a metaphor. But the point is that like The immune system are all the cells and molecules that are there to protect us. They're like the soldiers on the border. Mm-hmm. And then the stress response is like the system that communicates to them and says danger or no danger. So when the stress response gets active, the immune response gets active. Mm-hmm. The thing that we also have discovered, though, is that when the immune response is active, that's also a stress signal. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle. Wow. And again, depending on a lot of different variables, that's part of what can drive that cycle. Mm-hmm. Wow. And if we want to go further into it, should we go further into it?
Yeah, definitely.
Let me know if you have more questions. This is just a schematic of that. Don't get crazy with all the details, but like, here's the brain, and here's a depiction of the intestinal system, right? Because our gut is a huge modulator of our brain-body interaction. Yeah. Your gut is a massive like signaling organ intelligence that like helps the body respond for better or for worse. Yeah. And so stress signals come out of the brain and they go through this vagus nerve that can affect the gut so that you get changes in what's going on. We got this thing called the gut microbiota, the trillions of bacteria and viruses and fungi healthily, happily living in our gut. Under conditions of chronic stress, the microbiome changes. It changes towards a stress microbiome. That stress microbiome behaves differently. It can produce more inflammatory chemicals. It can contribute to breakdown of the gut lining, which we call intestinal permeability, or leaky gut is sort of the, you've heard that word. Yeah. So like, then there's all these neurotransmitters that come out of it that are generated by the gut microbiome and by the gut itself. It's like this incredible, dance of information. Yeah. And I'm showing this diagram, not that there's going to be a quiz at 2 p.m., but just like, this is in the scientific literature everywhere. Yeah. And it's like astonishing. This is just like a schematic of leaky gut, right? Where a healthy gut, you got these nice like connections between the cells. Yeah. Leaky gut, those connections break down a little bit and you get schmutz, you get stuff going through and accessing the immune system. Wow. So that could be like little particles of bacteria, undigested food, could be like, where antibodies lock onto things like gluten, for instance, that some people are sensitive to. And so you get this situation where it's not like, you've got pus dripping into your intestines, but it is that you've got an increased amount of stuff crossing over and activating the immune system that is wrapped around your intestines, and that creates systemic immune reactivity. Wow. And when the whole system of your body, when the immune system gets turned on, not only does that have negative effects of itself, but it feeds back into the stress loop. So there can be this vicious cycle, brain, gut, immune, and this is just another diagram for another research paper that's talking about intestinal permeability and risk of inflammation. And they're just pointing at, and they share in this paper, all the ways that intestinal permeability has been shown to affect the kidneys, muscle, fatty tissue, like causing more weight gain, right? Causing muscles to break down more quickly or not respond as well to exercise, causing cognitive problems, brain fog, depression, Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative stuff, Parkinson's disease. Wow. These are inflammatory illnesses that are driven by intestinal permeability. Heart and lung disease, alcoholic disease, liver disease, whether it's from alcohol or just from metabolic changes. Overactive stress response drives inflammation, drives instability of blood sugar, which creates this metabolic situation that makes the liver sick, makes the whole body sick. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah. So this is why stress can be bad.
Yeah. Wow. So would you say that majority of people recognize the stress that they're having, that they're stressed, or it's something that people are a bit oblivious to?
That's a great question. My experience is yes and no, right? A lot of people know it. A lot of people come in my door, or they fill out my online form right before they come and see me, and they're like, I'm dealing with all these medical problems and I think it's stress. And then some people are the opposite. Like, I saw someone not long ago, really bad chronic pain, anxiety, all this different stuff going on. We did this long history, and it's like clearly these triggering events in this person's life that actually have driven all of this stuff. And we're talking about bad fatigue and digestive problems, a lot of difficult symptoms, but you can see the thread in the history that they've all gotten worse when there's been traumatic stressors. And we see that pattern. This person's not ready to think about that. We talked about it and no, let's look at my microbiome. Let's look at these other things. Some people don't want to know. Some people are open to knowing, but they just never learn to pay attention because they're busy. Like, how do most of us get conditioned? I'm here in this world to do stuff. I go to school, I study, I write things, maybe I go to a job. I'm like carrying my brain around on the top of my body. I'm carrying my body around. I'm not really thinking about what I'm feeling. I'm mainly just thinking about my goal and my purpose. My mind's in the future, my mind's in the past. I'm not necessarily here and now going, wow, I had that experience today with my boss or my spouse or whatever it was, or the news, and I just don't feel as good, or my stomach's a little irritable. And the whole idea is that if a person's too vigilant and like pays too much attention to that, they can make themselves sick. Oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me, right? On the other hand, and this is really what mindfulness is about, it's just like noticing. Because our consciousness, our ability to be present and notice and be just like mature about stuff can help us when we start to pay attention. What's going on in my mind? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Let me just give it a little bit of attention. Stay connected to who I really am, which is a purposeful person who cares about my life and my family and my work and the world and Am Yisrael and Torah and Hashem or whatever it is. But like, okay, let me have some awareness of that. And that's, I think, a conditioned thing. You know? My own personal experience was I was a pretty stressed out young guy. And at a certain point, I started studying meditation and movement arts. And I learned to pay attention. So like all of a sudden I'd be driving, I'd be like, man, I am gripping that steering wheel. I'd be like, oh yeah,
wow.
Let me relax. Like, and you could start to do this if you want in life. And really it's like, start to notice, what am I feeling? What's going on in my body? With just awareness, compassion. Not that you have to react to it, but just awareness can be useful.
Wow.
And sometimes it's persistent and a person wants to do something conscious about it and learn some sort of technique to heal it, deal with it. So what are those things that we can do about it? Let's just talk a little bit more about like, the way that stress affects the body and the way that the body's influence affects back the mind and drives stress, because it might be helpful and interesting for folks.
Definitely.
And then we can talk about practical stuff, like what do you do about it?
Okay.
Because there's a lot to say. So this is just another way of just pointing out, brain, gut, immune system, like we just talked about. But it's like this, when I went to medical school, the brain was one thing and the gut was another and the immune system was something else. And now we're finding that we don't really know where to draw the line.
Wow.
I mean, we can, right? We can anatomically say this is the brain and that's your intestine. But if we actually look at the communication, the information system that connects all of the systems, it's very hard to say, well, no, those are chemicals that are related to the gastrointestinal tract and not the brain, because it's all this back and forth talk. And same with the immune system. So like we could draw a line around all of this and call it one system. And when we look at modern systems biology that's trying to understand all these chronic illnesses that conventional medicine doesn't know what to do about, what they're finding over and over again is that brain-gut immune interactions are part of what drives chronic illness. And, we have all these ologists for all the different organ systems, right? And every ology has its own chronic illnesses that are difficult. But when you go into the medical literature and look at that and say, gut-brain immune connection and rheumatoid arthritis, or Parkinson's disease, or Alzheimer's disease, or diabetes, or osteoarthritis, degenerative joint disease, or whatever disease, all of it, weight gain, obesity, everything, the chronic horrible things, we're seeing more and more research about gut-brain immune interactions, and that's why we've got this whole list, right? Like migraines, depression, anxiety, fatigue, abdominal pain, autoimmune abdominal pain, like colitis and Crohn's disease, neuropathy, dementia, autoimmune problems, chronic fatigue. These are a lot of diagnoses I see, but it's much broader than that in every specialty.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
It's a paradigm shift. It's really like, the medicine that we're practicing now, where people go into the doctor for some problem with their brain or their knee or their liver or their stomach, and the doctor focuses on that organ and that's all they focus it on, that is old school. That is dinosaur medicine.
Wow.
We're still doing it, but the research base for a progressive, integrative systems biology, where you go to see your doctor about your osteoarthritis, and he's thinking about your stress level. He's looking at your joint to understand how broken down it is and if you need an injection or surgery and what drugs to use. But he's going to be thinking also about your stress level, about what you're eating, about whether you have digestive symptoms, whether you're sleeping or not, whether you have supportive relationships. We have so much more data.
Yeah.
And as our data processing is getting more awesome with all this AI stuff going on, I think we're going to see in more and more models about how to study it all scientifically and how to work with it clinically so that the clinic of the future in 20 years is going to be much more holistic and integrative.
Wow.
And so like people can either get on that now or wait and get sicker and sicker until they figure it out. I know a lot of colleagues. Let's make like 3 groups at least. One group is like old school. No, this is the way I do it. That's what I'll do it. Blah, blah, blah. Like that's all they're doing. They're not interested in learning and changing. They're stuck in their paradigm. Then there's another group that's like, oh, interesting. Wow, okay, yeah. I see that there's some research demonstrating that mind-body variables can contribute to inflammation, or that digestive variables can contribute to inflammation, and maybe that has an impact on my patient's chronic pain or their whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's the conventional people who are still in the conventional system who are like, yes, and we know this is true, and that's why in our clinic we have a behavioral medicine person and we have a nutritionist that doesn't just like count calories but helps you eat an anti-inflammatory diet, and we have a whole mind-body program where you can learn like mindfulness or yoga or whatever it is, and that's built into our treatment program. Then we have team meetings and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then there's the people who are like, I'm so done with the old school stuff, and they're practicing in their own way, and they're going way into the frontier of integrated functional stuff. I probably see myself someplace, bridging those last two, where conventional medicine's real and it's important, and the science is real.
Of course, yeah.
But if we're neglecting the common sense that is so supported by updated science, then we're not doing our patients a favor, and in fact, I think it's negligent at this point.
Yeah.
And I haven't guessed what percentage of doctors are aware.
Yeah,
definitely. What's your experience?
I mean, I'll share an experience. It wasn't the most positive experience. I actually shared this in the group a couple of days ago. So this was probably around 5 years ago. I was around 70 pounds overweight. And I was very overweight, and I had GERD.
Oh, wow.
And something happened over Shabbos. I was just really, really not feeling good. And I didn't know I have GERD yet. And I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink. It was just...
Does everyone know what GERD is? You want to tell them?
Do you want to maybe share more about it?
Gastrointestinal reflux disease, gastroesophageal.
Yeah.
It's basically heartburn where your stomach stuff comes up into your esophagus and it burns, and it can do other bad things. People can get, esophageal cancer, they can get asthma, all sorts of things can come from it.
Yeah.
And obesity is a big risk factor for it.
Yeah, and so it got very, very bad. Yeah. So I went to a doctor. I'm obviously not going to say his name. So I went to a doctor, and he had all his assistants come in, or the nurses. They did the test and all that, and he's like, "Yeah, you have GERD." He came in for like a second, didn't like ask me anything. He's like, "Yeah, you have GERD. Omeprazole. Just take omeprazole." I was like, "Okay, is there anything else like I should be doing?" He's like, "No, just take omeprazole." He didn't ask me about what I'm eating, which was very I wasn't eating the right things. He didn't ask me if I'm getting enough exercise. And then later on, like once Baruch Hashem, I realized like how to exercise right and how to eat, and I lost the weight, Baruch Hashem. I was like, something's wrong with this. Like this is not the best system. And then once I found through Dr. Hyman about functional medicine, I was like, wow, this is it. Like these are doctors that are actually trying to find the root cause, not just giving a pill and just saying take it your whole life. And I thought it was really incredible.
It's true. Yeah, it's interesting, and for me, I think what comes up after being in this world of medicine for like 30 years is seeing that model of medicine, which is what I trained in. And over the years, shifting just from seeing truth and both common sense clinical experience as well as research and looking into mechanisms and studying natural healing, and seeing that there's this other model where the patient is as important as the doctor, and what the patient's choices are and what their beliefs are. And like the process you've gone through, it's kind of a heroic journey, right? You walked into this authority structure of conventional medicine, which is just, it's a paradigm. It's not truth. It accesses a certain aspect of truth. Medical research has value, but it's just a piece of the pie. And the dogma and the arrogance that says this is everything and you should do it this way, I think is very toxic to individuals in society and to the doctors. And to me, part of the potential revolution that's going on in functional medicine and in natural and integrative medicine is that we're giving patients authority, we're giving them knowledge and inspiration and the ability to transform what's going on. And they're becoming, it's an aspect of sovereignty, as opposed to just submitting to the authority of a system that doesn't really have their interests at heart. There's a lot of good in modern medicine. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just like, okay, the system's not really working, right? There's a lot of good. People go in for the right reasons. Then there's like the whole business corporate thing that distorts things, and there's a lot of influences. But it's like, it's about returning to sovereignty, and it's about a democratization of health and people learning how to take care of themselves. And it seems to me like it's part of a broader movement of democratization that's going on. Like, go to New York City, it's not about taxi cabs, it's Uber. You know, there's so many places where big social changes going on, not all for the good, but there's a lot of democratization of knowledge, authority, information. I think this is one of those areas where it's very positive, because when a person's in their own being with strength and clarity, and they're well, physical, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, like that person is making a positive impact in the world. Like that's what we're here to do. That's how to find the light in the darkness. Build a deer talk to that. You're like, how do you do that? You got to be sovereign. You got to be a shliach.
Like I was saying to you before the podcast, something that I was thinking about when we were doing the first interview is how lucky your patients are to have a doctor that mamish cares and is trying to figure things out, not just, passively giving.
I'm lucky that I've had so many patients who've taught me so much. Seriously, people have walked in the door and like, okay, it comes in the conversation, but a lot of people have figured stuff out on their own. They're like, doc, and I'm like, what? And they're like, and they give it to me. Whatever, it's a whole journey. Thank you, I appreciate that. So anyhow, there we are talking about all these diseases that come from gut-brain immune imbalances. And then there's this other piece, which is that like, we've been talking about stress as something that comes from the top down, right? Difficult news or event, I have a perception, my thoughts, my conditioning, my emotions, all of that generates stress physiology. But it's not just top down, it's also bottom up. And that's a really huge principle that we have to recognize. This is from Dr. Guillaumes, who's like a professor in America at the University of New England. And he this is all very research-based stuff. He's got like a monograph this big that's all about the 4 categories of things that drive stress signaling in the brain. These are bodily things. So one is perceived stress, like we all talked about. All that stuff we talked about is the blue stuff. But then there's glycemic dysregulation. So when your blood sugar goes down, your brain and your body experience it as an emergency. Because if you don't have enough glycemic, blood sugar, your brain dies, your organs die. So people have unstable blood sugar, very common in our society. One of my friends, when I was in residency, he was really big in nutrition, big researcher at Children's Hospital, David Ludwig. He did these original studies that showed, like, he's a brilliant scientist. He gave people shakes, kids, he's a pediatrician. He gave kids shakes, same taste, same texture, can't tell the difference. One was pure protein and healthy fats, the other was high sugar, high simple carbohydrates. 2 groups of people. And then they looked at a lot of different things. They looked at how much the people ate during the day. They looked at their cortisol level, their stress hormone level during the course of the day. The people who got the high sugar load, several hours after, had a big spike in their stress, their biochemistry of stress, their epinephrine and their cortisol. Why is that? Because when our blood sugar goes up fast, it creates a big insulin response. That insulin response drives the blood sugar down. It like cranks it down. So the blood sugar drops and the body goes, oh my gosh, need more blood sugar. When the stress hormones go off, the body produces blood sugar. So that's a huge thing, and especially with diet, the way people are eating, if you're eating a lot of simple carbs and you're not eating blood sugar stable food with stable glycemic index and all of that, you can be generating stress. When you wake up, the perceived stress stuff. And then the glycemic dysregulation, that's in orange. The purple or lavender, whatever that is, that's inflammatory and toxic signals. So it's like when a person has inflammation in their body, and we talked about these pathways towards inflammation through the gut, through the joints, whatever it is, that is a stressor. And then the final thing he talks about is circadian disruption. So people who are not sleeping at night, people who have sleep apnea, people who are working night shift and they're like sleeping during the day and up at night. You know, like the Master of the Universe created this beautiful cycle called like light and dark. We have hormones that synchronize with that. We got melatonin at night, cortisol burn in the morning. Yeah. When a person regularly flips up their sleep and turns it upside down, our hormones get upside down. Our signaling gets upside down. Yeah. So these are all huge influences on our well-being. And so this is sort of a final thing, like how does danger signal happening? Well, it could be a lot of things. Life stress, pain, trauma, immune dysfunction, toxic exposure, drugs, acute illness, surgery, crisis, right? I think I wrote this when COVID was going on and made this slide. But there's a bunch of systemic processes in our conscious mind noticing dangerous thing. Yeah. Our immune system sensing our environment, our structure experiencing physical harm, our biochemistry being exposed to other biochemistry. In our cellular structure, in the structure of our cells, we've got all these danger patterns that are molecules and proteins that have been mapped out about how like the overall system perceives danger, and then the cells get sick. Wow. When there's persistent cellular danger or danger signaling, the cells kind of like shut down. It's like a protective response. And they decrease cellular communication and energy production. They can change the protein synthesis. The cells themselves, so to speak, get more hypervigilant. The immune system gets reactive. So this is the chronic disease development process. Wow. It's happening on a cellular level from a whole set of different changes that can be sort of inputting on the cells and generating chronic illness. Wow. And this is the future of chronic illness medicine, is understanding. When people come into me, I'm like, okay, what's going on with your cells? Okay, you had these traumatic events in life, and here's your diet, and here's your stress level, and here's what happened 5 years ago when you got really sick in Nepal and you were throwing up for 6 weeks, what happened to your microbiome, whatever it is, all of that impacting on the cellular function and generating these downstream problems, whether it's inflammatory arthritis or brain disease and degeneration or diabetes and obesity and on and on. Wow. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow, so I think it's probably safe to say that majority of chronic illnesses are happening due to stress, due to some type of stress.
I would say it's involved, yeah. It's involved because, it might not have been the original trigger. For some people, it is the original trigger, right? There's a category of events that are called adverse childhood events, ACEs, right? And that's things like trauma or really bad injuries or a child whose mother was acutely ill when they were in the womb and had an emergency C-section and low APGAR scores. Whatever it is, early life, profound stressors. It could be trauma, abuse, neglect. Shape the nervous system and generate a tendency towards a more reactive stress response with all the biochemical and neurologic things that can go along with it, depending on the person's genetics. People who have had ACEs have a much higher incidence of a variety of different disease processes, and that's stress-driven, triggered early event. Other people have that trigger in the traumatic experience they had when they were 7 or 15 or 20 or 40. Yeah. People come into my office with chronic pain and chronic illness, and I do the history, and it's like, oh yeah, well I was in the war and blah, 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 and ever since then I've never been the same. And it wasn't just the physical injuries to their bones or their bodies. It was the way they developed diabetes, and then they became obese, and then they became, fatty liver disease or whatever it is. Wow. And then, like you said, once a cycle of chronic illness or inflammatory stuff starts, there are stressors that are feeding into it. Autonomic imbalance that comes from the actual biology and feeds back into the biology. And that's where the whole mind-body piece about how do we influence our stress response, how do we influence our autonomic nervous system becomes so incredibly important, because we could just sort of ignore that and say, oh no, it's not because of my mind or my stress or any of that. A lot of people don't want to be in denial about that. Yeah. It's very easy to say, no, that's no, right? Like we have this strange stigma, I think, especially maybe in the religious world too, where it's like, we don't want to consider mental illness as a possibility here. Yeah. So we ignore this part of it. And I think it's a huge mistake. Yeah, it's not that it's mental illness, but it is an imbalance in the body's physiology that can be improved. Yeah. through a whole bunch of things we could talk about if you want.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right.
Let's do it.
How to reduce and manage stress. Should we talk about that?
Let's do it.
This is the first thing I just want to point to this slide, right? It's a really simple idea, but just that thought, emotion, and your actual physiology are one system also. We think about them differently.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it. I'm not having an emotional response about it. But our emotions are wrapped into our thoughts, which drive our emotions, right? There's cycles there. And our physiology is part of that too. So it's all one system. And, your state of mind and emotion, that's what's in the center of the slide. It's influencing brain function and pain pathways and gut biome and gut barrier and all of that. Your motivation for self-care, your relationships and roles, your energy production, your immune function. Major stuff. And so I like to take it out of the idea of stress management because that's really limited. When I hear stress management, I'm thinking about breathing exercises to turn on vagal tone and the relaxation response. And that's where it started. It's really important. But it's such a broader piece. And especially as people who are growing close to Hashem, people who want to live spiritual lives and live Torah lives, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, if you want to live a life of divine service, you need all of you.
Yeah.
And you need to be healthy in all parts of you.
Yeah.
I like to use this mnemonic, and if you see the slide, there's 3 concentric circles that are kind of meeting each other, and one represents mind-body variables, the other is like movement, structural things, and the other is metabolism.
Yeah.
And so broadly speaking, there's like mind-body stuff that has a huge impact, and we'll talk about what that is. There's movement stuff like exercising, running, or other kinds of movement. There's physical treatments like massage or acupuncture that have a huge impact on managing this overall physiology of stress. And then like we talked about our chemical metabolic system, what we're eating or not eating, what we're ingesting. Eating lots of sugary, sweet, fun stuff spikes the energy and drops it.
Yeah.
So these are all really important things. And just like mapping out a bunch of stuff that's out there, there's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And there's mind-body things, and there's mechanical motor things, and metabolic things. I kind of talked about this a little bit already, but it's like, there's a whole thing out there where people are talking about vagal tone. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I have.
Vagal hacking, And why is that? Because the vagus nerve, we saw it in one of the pictures earlier. A lot of people are talking about hacking the vagus and vagal tone and neurologic self-regulation. It's a big thing in the coaching sphere, right? In the blogosphere about coaching and performance and health. Hack your Vegas, hack your Vegas. Why aren't you healthy? Because you didn't hack your Vegas. Why are you so miserable you can't successfully work? You didn't hack your Vegas. Like it's the whole solution for everything, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reality to it, right? We saw it in the diagram in the beginning. We saw it, the parasympathetic nervous system. It's your big parasympathetic nerve, and it operates and influences all the organs of your gut. And vagal tone, the activity of the vagus nerve, is so important that they are investing millions, big companies, in creating vagal stimulation. And maybe you've heard about it. There's certain devices that you can put on your ear or your neck or whatever it is. They stimulate the vagus. And they're also creating invasive vagal stimulation for people with really bad illness, like really bad inflammatory illness or depression, and they neurosurgically implant a little stimulator in the neck on the vagus nerve and pop it, stimulate it. There's all sorts of issues with the technology. It works really well for some people and really badly for others because the vagus is touching a lot, so it can create nausea and dizziness and vertigo and all this stuff. It's got to be done right. So, and they're still working it out. But we've got all these techniques for turning on the vagus nerve through breath control, through cold plunge. Maybe, we don't really know, there's no research, but like certainly breath activity.
There's no research about the cold plunges?
Not that I'm aware of. I looked it up not so long ago.
Okay.
But it's cool and it feels good.
Yeah.
Like I've done it. It's like, right? I jump in the cold mikvah a lot. The Aris mikvah in spot. It's not just the ruchnius, it's also a physiological thing going on there.
Yeah.
And so, so there's a lot of ways to stimulate the vagus. Simple box breathing. If you want a simple technique, the easiest thing to learn is simply like elongating your inhalation, holding the breath for 2 seconds, long or slow exhalation, so that you're breathing about 6 times a minute but not getting short of breath. That's the simplest thing a person can do, and it can have a huge impact. Do that for 5 minutes twice a day. It could change your life. Wow. And it's beautiful and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And so that's physiology. And then there's like getting into the world of awareness and emotions, and that's where the mindfulness has power.
Yeah.
Mindfulness just being basically das, that's how we understand mindfulness in a certain way. It's presence, like there's das and there's das. There's das Elyon and das Takton. Das Takton is just being aware. Lower das, consciousness, presence to what's happening in my thoughts, my emotions, my body sensations. Really powerful work. And other things too, like CBT is useful for some people, but for some people it just doesn't get deep enough depending on what's going on for them. Mental imagery is amazing, like our koach hatziur, our power of imagination. When you imagine something vividly, your heart doesn't know the difference. If you imagine a joyous experience, you'll start to feel joy. If you imagine a calming experience, your physiology will start to experience calm. So these are powerful tools that get used in clinical circumstances in many different situations, and many people learn them. We talked about breath work and obviously prayer and journaling. These are mind-body techniques.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole unpacking we could do of that about like, okay, how does a Torah Jew or a spiritual person who wants to hear the wisdom of the Torah, how do they think about all this? And we could talk about that if you want.
Let's do it.
But just to kind of finish this, I think we touched on it already, that like physical exercise is amazing, but here's the thing, most of the research on cardiovascular working out and aerobics is like, oh, you get your heart rate up, so you strengthen your heart, right? Well, like, really? Is that what's going on? I've looked into this, it's been a few years, but all of the research is looking at like elevating heart rate, but none of it's looking at the regulatory changes that happen after we do the aerobic exercise. So after you do your 5K or 10K run on the beach and you sit down and chill, what's going on in your body? Among the things probably going on in your body, your endorphins are coming up, your parasympathetic nervous system's turning on, you may have other hormonal or polypeptide changes that are just creating that calm post-workout. That's healthy, right?
Yeah.
All this stress stuff that turns off. Running is a stressor.
Yeah.
But afterwards you get a big parasympathetic and much more complex than that chill out that happens. And so like no one's ever answered the question about like, well, maybe that's actually part of why people do so much better when they get aerobic exercise across so many disease outcomes, whether it's cardiovascular or diabetes or weight or all these other things. Yeah. So anyhow, it's all important stuff. Nutrients is a whole different world. How about we don't go there now, and if we want to talk more about it?
Sure.
Yeah. There's so much to talk about. It's crazy. It's interesting to me, like we talked a little bit about physiology and emotion and mind. And, this is sort of the original model of our brain from like ancient, currently debunked neuroanatomy, because we used to think that, okay, we have this separate reptilian brain, and then we evolved with a limbic brain like animals happen, and then we evolved with a neocortex like humans. And so like that was the predominant paradigm for a while, and as if it was an evolutionary process. But then we figured out like, well, no, that's not really what's going on. These systems are so connected with each other. And the main thing, if you look for neuroscientists talking about like, how these things are connected, like there's no reptilian brain, there's no limbic brain. And there isn't, because maybe it didn't all develop from evolution. Maybe these things are interconnected to each other, and they are interconnected. But the functions are still true. And we still have intellectual functions, and we have emotional functions, and we have physiologic functions. And so it's still relevant in my mind to think about it biologically, how health is being affected by overall state of stress, relaxation, nutrition, all this kind of stuff. So let's map the territory, right? Let's get into the whole like, how could a Torah Jew think about this? And let's get panimi, because whatever, I'll just share some stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so like obviously there's body, emotion, mind, and there's spirit, right? And in Panemius Torah, we have 4 worlds. And let's leave off this really high integrated stuff like Yechida and Chaya, but we got Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. There are 3 aspects of who we are, 3 aspects of our being. Yeah. And they more or less correspond to body and emotions and intellect. There's a lot of systems, there's a lot of different ways of talking about this depending on which Sfarim you're reading. But let's just note that there is a little bit of overlap in the phenomenon of well-being and how it relates to physical, emotional, and mental functioning, and that we do have this map in our Sfarim, and the map can help guide us. And it kind of maps on to this whole brain thing. Wow. Right? Yeah. And so I think that's kind of interesting and cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And so like that like, just to spell it out, like Here's the brainstem with all automatic functions of how your heart rate and blood pressure work and your hormones and all this different stuff in your brainstem. And that kind of maps onto the nefesh, the body, the physiologic, the embodied soul. And then this emotional center, the limbic system, that's more or less your emotional soul. And then we got this neshama level, which is your divine intellect and your divine knowing. Let's go deeper because there's a lot more to this. Yeah? I like to think about this, right? Asiya, Yitzira, Bria, Atzilut. That's the Chachamim's description of these four worlds of physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And the way I see it, modern medicine and even expanded mind-body medicine in modern society, as it's being done in the best integrative clinics, with the best integrative natural medicine healing providers who are out there doing all sorts of great stuff with breath work and IFS and body-centered body work and massage and energy work and craniosacral. It's three worlds. It's three worlds medicine. It's addressing Asiya, Yitzira, Bria explicitly. Of course, the neshama is part of the picture. The neshama is penetrating all of that constantly. But we're not necessarily going out and connecting to it. And from my perspective, as someone who's been practicing integrative medicine for a long time, and especially like past 10 years or so, learning deeper and deeper into what Hasidus and Kabbalah talk about all these connections between body, emotion, mind, and spirit. And there's a ton of it, and it's astonishing how much the Zohar and other texts like predicted things we're learning in modern medical science. Like it's mind-blowing to me over the years.
Yeah.
That could be a whole other conversation and topic. Right? Like there was a brilliance there in understanding how our breathing and the function of our heart and the fats in our body affect mental illness and amazing things. Like Rabbi Nachman refers to the Zohar talking about these things. Amazing things.
Yeah.
So let's not go there, let's keep it practical. What I see is that the Torah's view is radical in its next level in terms of how we can understand our health and well-being. Because most of modern three worlds medicine, Asiya, Yitzira, Bria, physical, emotional, mental, you're in there in your problems and you're trying to fix the problems. And like, what are those problems really? And where are they really coming from? And the Torah perspective is less about those problems and more about your connection. Like, are we really connected to Hashem? Are we connected to our soul's light? It's not so hard to see that so much of the stress and pain and suffering that we get is because we're disconnected. And I see this when I work with people around mind-body stuff. I think I might have talked about a case like that in the past. You know, this kid was struggling to like breathe through his pain, and all he did was just breathe and feel Hashem breathing him. And when he did that, it really started to change the whole experience, because at the core of so much disconnection and so much suffering is disconnection. And it's ultimately disconnection from source. The crazy way I got turned on to this was like, in the mid-1990s, I went to a Harvard Medical School conference on mind-body medicine. There's this guy, Dr. Greg Friccione, who's now like the CEO at Mass General of their mind-body program. So, really interesting guy. He got up there and he was talking about all the research he did on rat brains and addictions. He was like a neurology, psychology, PhD doctor. And he's like, studied all these things about rat brain addiction, the parts of the brain that are involved in reward and comfort and pleasure and blah, 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 blah. And really it all comes down to connection. So you've got this guy who's like from some Italian, maybe he's Catholic, who knows what his religious, spiritual background is, but he's a scientist. And he's studying the biology, and he's finding, wow, there's this pattern here, that animals tend to get addicted, tend to have this kind of disconnection going on.
Wow.
So I've been just watching that principle in almost 30 years of clinical practice. There's a lot of daylight between rat brains and a human being, right? But the pattern, the principle shows over and over. And when we look in our Sfarim, what we see is this notion that there's a spiritual solution. And so, like, what's the Torah's spiritual solution from this spiritual perspective?
Yeah.
It's devekut. It's about connecting to Hashem and being connected. I always forget psukim, but it's basically like Atem hadevekim la Hashem Elokechem hayom chayim kulchem halom. You're high. You're alive. You're living. Chiyut is vitality, and it's aliveness. Aliveness comes to us through connection with Hashem. We have something special when we actually touch into that place of interconnection, and What we have is a soul root. We have the origin of who we are. We have our sense of purpose. We have the sense of meaning. Like, you look at the amazing work in the Holocaust from Man's Search of Meaning.
Man's Search of
Viktor
Meaning.
Frankl.
Viktor Frankl, yeah.
So like we look in the work of Viktor Frankl in the Holocaust, who like went through Auschwitz, and like he made this clear separation that people who had meaning and purpose survived hell, and the people who didn't fell into that. What were they falling into? It was a horrible circumstance. There was malnutrition. There was horrible stress and pain. But the people who had meaning and connection and purpose somehow made it. Somehow it gave them protection or the ability to tolerate incredible suffering.
Like you see also with the hostages. It's very similar as well.
Exactly, amazing, right? These beautiful stories. Do you remember any of them in particular?
So I just, when you were talking about this, I recalled that there was a really amazing interview with Meaningful Minute Podcast, Meaningful People Podcast, with the head psychologist of the Mossad. He's the only person in the Mossad that can actually, I guess, disclose that he works for the Mossad. And he was giving an interview, and he was saying something unbelievable about the hostages is that majority of them are not struggling with PTSD later on.
Wow.
Yeah, well, you would think like people go through much less than that, and they're barely getting by, and then they literally were in Gaza for like over more than 2 years, and they don't have PTSD. Like, and many of them, he said that they come out and they have that in those circumstances as well. They had that sense of meaning that they have to get home, they have to be there for their nation, and they had that. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I would observe that the people who came out, it was 2 years later.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ones who maybe didn't have that, whatever it is, might not have made it out.
Possibly,
Not judgmenting anybody, but if they made it, it may have been because they somehow plugged in.
Yeah.
And I remember these beautiful stories from some of them who came out and gave testimonies. And it's really what I'm talking about, that like there is a Torah solution from the pure spiritual perspective of finding a connection to your soul root, realizing you're a neshama who's got a body, rather than a body who's just trying to manage all these problems. There's a famous quote that people attribute to Albert Einstein, but I don't think it's really from him. And it goes, you can't fix a problem at the same level of consciousness that created the problem. So most of modern three worlds medicine is trying to fix the problem at the level that created it. It's in the physical body, it's in the nefesh, it's in the animal soul, it's in the ego self. And we've got a spiritual self, we've got a neshama that's above that, that has a perspective. That when you look in the writings of our sages, it came to this world with a purpose, it came to this world intentionally, and it's always there. It's always there waiting to give us vitality. That chiyus, that aliveness, is coming from the place we call chokhmah. Chokhmah is clarity and insight. It's drips of honey. When you look into the Svarim, Rabbi Nachman, Baal Shem Tov, Menachem Mendel, Vitebsker, like they're talking about this Dvekus experience and this Rishimu that comes back down to us after we connect in to a place where we're a little bit more in bittul, we're less of a nefesh, we're more of a neshama. We plug into a certain extent according to our individual ability, and we draw down a particular kind of light. So I just want to share one little beautiful thing I saw this morning from the Tanya. Right, and so,
From today's Tanya?
No.
Oh, just in general Tanya.
So there's a Yeshayahu, which I love to look at, and I'm just going to read it so I don't mispronounce it, but like, V'amek kulchem tzadikim leolam yirshu aretz nitzur meta'ai ma'aseh yadei lehit pa'er. Like, what is that telling us? That your nation, they're all tzadikim. What does that mean? Forever they have this connection, and they can dwell in the land. The tzidkus is the aspect of connecting to Hashem. It's the aspect of Dvekus. And through Dvekus, we become this planting of Hashem. A planting of Hashem, when we connect to our inner soul, what we connect to is our potential. And we become this thing that Hashem is hit pa'er in. Hashem takes pride in us. When we do beautiful things, because we overcome some sort of challenge, because we're plugged into our soul's light, it gives joy, so to speak, to Hashem. And the beautiful Tanya, as he just comments on that, and he says, "Hanefesh heshenit b'Yisrael hi chelek Elokai mima'al mamish." like we actually have a piece of God in us, mamish. It's mamish. It's not just an idea.
Yeah.
And so what I would say about how we often deal with things in terms of stress and pain and illness is that the normal Frum response, the kind of reflex thing is like, have emunah, you'll deal with it. You're diagnosed with cancer, have emunah. You had a horrible car accident, have emunah. That's often not helpful for people.
Yeah.
And I had so many examples of people for whom it was harmful. It's like, well, I don't have emunah, I'm broken. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And they feel miserable because they're supposed to have emunah. And what strikes me is that, no, we actually have tools for building that emunah. Because emunah is connection. Emunah is deveku. And so part of it depends on not just leaving it as an intellectual process. That emunah is not just an intellectual process, but we bring the emunah into our hearts. We bring the emunah into our bones. How do we get that felt sense of emunah? All these spiritual techniques like counting breathing, like breath work, like mindfulness, all of that can be brought into a context where we're actually thinking about Hashem, where we're meditating on Hashem. Some people want to get Hashem Havaya and like look at it and let themselves connect to the letters. If you look at Amud Tefillah, which is Baal Shem Tov's parish on Parshas Noach, Aseil Chateva, and he darshans about how Teva is the word of the words of prayer and tefillah. We need to go into those words and connect to the spirituality inside those words. And it's not just Chassidus, it's the first halacha in Shulchan Aruch, Shaviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. And if you look at the Mishnah Berurah there, he says, and you should write Shem Havaya, Katav Asurit, like in the Torah, and have it on a piece of paper in front of you, and look at it and connect to it. So you're always connecting to Hashem's name. So it's a whole realm of practices and processes and learning to learn to actually connect to Hashem like that. But in any physical activity we're doing, in any mind-body activity, whether it's breathing or whether it's movement arts, to know that we're rooted and that we're connected, to build a sense of feeling, to arouse our emotion, our imagination, so I get a feeling that I'm connected to Hashem.
Yeah.
Like the gratitude practice of just like, not just writing down what we're grateful for, but like talking out the things we're grateful for till we become aroused with joy from it. That's connection. Gratitude is a connection directly to the source. We're generating an emotional sense of connection to Hashem. If you take a body scan, which is one of these mindfulness practices, and you lie down and you feel every bit of your body, and you use your imagination that you're breathing, and as you're breathing, Hashem is nifach ruach chaim into you. Hashem is breathing the light of Shem Havaya into you and breathing vitality into every cell in your body, and you feel the cells of your body pulsing and relaxing. Like it's a totally different experience than just sitting down and paying attention to your body.
Wow. Beautiful. Dr. Shiller, it's been really a pleasure speaking to you. I learned so much, and I'm sure our viewers are going to learn a lot. Let's say if someone 20 years from now remembers just one thing out of this whole podcast, what would you want that to be?
Wow, it's a great question. I think the most important thing is the thing that everybody else isn't saying. And everybody else is talking about all these things you can do to reduce your stress and manage your vagus and manage your mindfulness and your emotions. So the thing that I would invite people to take home is it's not just about managing your emotions and managing your stress. It's about reestablishing your identity, that you're in a neshama that's connected to the source of life. And let that start to move through you and find tools to start to experience that in a tangible way on a regular basis throughout your day.
Wow. Beautiful. Okay.
We can all do this, right? Like we all have the capacities in the psukim, that we all have a chelak elokei mimal. And it's really a question of just making the choice to connect to it. And to make it real for us.
Wow.
And not just something we think about on Shabbos when we're feeling good.
Wow. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.